Welcome to Village Church. We're committed to seeing people transformed into fully devoted followers of Jesus. We do this through focusing on gospel, community, and culture. Learn more about us at thisisvillagechurch.com.
Welcome to Village Church, everyone. It is so good to have you here with us from across all of our locations and online. Welcome to you. If you're new with us, a special welcome to you. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are at the beginning of a brand new series. It's our fall series, and we're talking about Jesus in His own words. Of course, every week we talk about Jesus' words, we teach about Jesus' words, we unpack the words of Jesus and how it impacts every part of our life. But we're going to focus for the next 4 weeks on specific things that Jesus said and how it applies to us. So, super excited about the fall series. Thank goodness it is fall. You know, one of the things you realize as a parent with school-age kids is you are so excited that summer is done. Any parents know what I'm talking about? It's like, yes, the kids are back to school, which is great. So, anyways, great to be here. Great to be able to teach through this. We're going to look at John chapter 14 and 6, a statement that Jesus makes. And then we're going to go to John chapter 4, and we're going to unpack a story in the context or in the backdrop of this statement that Jesus makes and how it impacts our lives. So here's what it says. John 14 and verse 6 says this. Jesus said to him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. So how did Jesus work this out? How did Jesus teach this through His life and through His ministry? We're going to go to John 4, and I'm going to start reading from verse 4 on. Here's what it says. And He had to pass through Samaria. So He came to a town of Samaria called Sychar, near the field that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, so Jesus, wearied as he was from his journey, was sitting beside the well. It was about the 6th hour. A woman from Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, give me a drink. For his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, how is it that you, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a woman of Samaria? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. Jesus answered her, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that is saying to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water. The woman said to him, sir, you have nothing to draw water with, and the well is deep. Where do you get that living water? She's curious. She's interested now. Are you greater than our father Jacob? He gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did his sons and his livestock. Jesus said to her, everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks of the water that I will give him will never be thirsty again. The water that I will give him will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life. The woman said to him, sir, give me this water so that I will not be thirsty or have to come here to draw water. Verse 16, Jesus said to her, go call your husband and come here. The woman answered him, I have no husband. Jesus said to her, you are right in saying I have no husband, for you have had 5 husbands. The sister had some issues going on in her life. And the one you now have is not your husband. What you've said is true. The woman said to her, sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, but you say that in Jerusalem is the place where people ought to worship. Jesus said to her, woman, believe me, the hour is coming when neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, for salvation is from the Jews. But the hour is coming and is now here, when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For the Father is seeking such people to worship Him. God is spirit, and those who worship Him must worship in spirit and truth. The woman said to Him, I know that the Messiah is coming,
he who is called Christ, when he comes, he will tell us all things. Jesus said to her, I who speak to you am he. Verse 27. Just then his disciples came back. They marveled that he was talking with a woman, but no one said, what do you seek? Or why are you talking with her? So the woman left her water jar and went away into town and said to the people, come see a man who told me all that I ever did. Can this be the Christ? They went out of the town and were coming to him. Meanwhile, the disciples were urging him, saying, Rabbi, eat. But he said to them, I have food to eat that you do not know about. So the disciples said to one another, has anyone brought him something to eat? Jesus said to them, my food is to do the will of him who sent me and to accomplish his work. Do you not say that there are yet 4 months, then comes the harvest? Look, I tell you, lift up your eyes and see that the fields are white for harvest. Already the one who reaps is receiving wages and gathering fruit for eternal life, so the sower and the reaper may rejoice together. For here the saying holds true, one sows and another reaps. I sent you to reap that which you did not labor. Others have labored, and you have entered into their labor. A powerful story and portion of scripture of Jesus dealing with this woman who, for all intents and purposes, he should have nothing to do with. When Jesus says to us, I am the way, often here's what we think about. We're like, I need to figure out how to find Jesus. I need to figure out how to do all the right things, how to be the right kind of religious person, doing all the things I'm supposed to do, following all the rules, and not doing things I shouldn't do, and doing things I should do. And if I do all those things, maybe I'll find a way. I'll find the way to heaven. I'll find the way to Jesus. I'll find the way to eternal life. And yet, when you look at this story, what fascinates me is in verse 4, Jesus said, it says about Jesus that he had to go through Samaria. Now, navigationally, he didn't have to go through Samaria. There was no reason. He could have taken sort of a roundabout way. In fact, a lot of Jews in their time did that because the Samaritans were sort of enemies to the Jews. They didn't associate together. And so Jesus saying he had to go through it, through Samaria, was basically this idea that Jesus had made an appointment to meet with this woman, even though she didn't know it. He was waiting for her. I love when he says in verse 6, it says, Jacob's well was there, so Jesus, wearied as he was from his journey, was sitting beside the well, and it was about the 6th hour. He was waiting for her. He was tired. The 6th hour is noon. In the hot Middle Eastern sun, he's waiting for an appointment with a woman whose life he's about to change. Her life is about to be transformed by him. And then in verse 4, of course, he had to pass through Samaria. John 3:16 says this, for God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. That is the message of Jesus. When we think about the words of Jesus, there is nothing more powerful than this idea that Jesus was sent to us. That's the gospel message, that we don't initiate relationship with Jesus. He initiates relationship with us. We don't know him. We don't see him. He sees us. He loves us. He has compassion on us. He wants to encounter us. You know, in the world, the lower people, the person who is in a lower status, waits for the person of a greater status, right? Like if you go to a concert or you go to a sporting event or whatever, you always are there before the actual person who is the star of the show shows up. You're waiting for them. And so when people say to me, I don't know, man, it's so hard to follow God, to follow Jesus and all the rules. I don't know. Listen, you're misunderstanding the heart of Jesus. Jesus' heart is he lowers himself, even though he is the king of the universe. He is the creator of all things. He is the Son of God, the Savior of the world, the Messiah. He says, I'm going to humble myself and I'm going to wait on you. And when he does wait on her and when he does encounter her, it's interesting because she says to him in verse 7, it says, a woman from Samaria came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, give me a drink. And the Samaritan woman said to him, how is it that you, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a woman of Samaria? She was surprised that Jesus would speak to her. When we read later, when the disciples came back in verse 27, it says, when the disciples came back, they marveled that he was talking with a woman. But no one said, what do you seek? Or why are you talking with her? The idea, the understanding of like, this is not normal. This isn't supposed to happen. She is surprised. The disciples are surprised. Why? Because they're not supposed to connect. These two people are not supposed to connect. And yet, Jesus is on a mission to find this woman. Luke chapter 19 and 10 says, for the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. To seek, meaning to look for, to find. This is the message of Christianity. It's that God came to find you. Today, you're listening to my sermon right now. For the next few moments, here's what I want you to know. God is coming looking for you. You didn't come here by coincidence. You're not in this room or any room that you're in or online by coincidence. God is searching for you. He is seeking you out, and He's speaking to you today because He wants to transform your life. There were all kinds of reasons why the disciples were surprised. There was all kinds of reasons why this woman would be surprised. One, ethnically, they're not supposed to connect. He's a Jew and she's a Samaritan. The Samaritans and the Jews had all kinds of historical issues that they were facing. Partly because what had happened in Samaria is the Assyrian kingdom had come in about 700 BC, and they had conquered the northern kingdom of Israel. And they had taken sort of the best people off to Assyria, and they sent Assyrian people to settle down in that area. And they intermarried, and what had happened was they combined the worship of God with the worship of pagan idols that were worshipped in the nations around them. So these people were sort of worshiping mixed gods. They were worshiping the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but they were also worshiping idols. So there was this sort of enmity between the Jews and the Samaritans. In fact, the Jews at one point attacked their temple in Mount Gerizim and destroyed it. So ethnically, there's a barrier. These two individuals are not supposed to talk to each other. Gender-wise, there's a barrier. At that time, women had a very low status in society, regardless of Samaritan or Jew, whatever. A man would not publicly speak to a woman. Even they say, if you were married, you wouldn't speak publicly to your wife in front of other people. It was always a private thing. And if you were single, you would never speak to a woman or touch a woman or have any kind of interaction with a woman in public. And so there was a gender gap between them. And then, of course, there was a social status gap because this woman comes at noon. The only reason she would come at noon is because she doesn't want to see and meet other people at the well. Typically, women would come earlier in the morning or later in the evening because the Middle Eastern sun, listen, I grew up in Bahrain, in the Middle East, 18 years of my life. In the summers, it gets to like 50 degrees. It is so hot. I mean, I remember hearing stories of people dying of heat exhaustion. And if you worked outdoors, your company would basically not allow you to work. They would give you a break from about 11 o'clock to about 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And so the only reason she would come at the hottest time of the day is because she didn't want to connect with people. And you understand why. Because it says she was married 5 times and the man she's living with now was not her husband. How many of you know that the other women in town had an issue with this woman? They're like, we're not befriending you, right? We don't want to have a relationship with you. So she's coming in and she's an outcast in her society. She's an outcast amongst the people of her town. And Jesus is a Jewish rabbi, a respectable man, a miracle worker, a great teacher. There's the barrier of social status. But what does Jesus do? He breaks through each of those barriers. He deliberately goes and breaks through the barriers. And even though she's a gender outsider, a moral outsider, a religious outsider, a racial outsider, she's an outlaw and he's an insider. He says to her, I would like to get to know you. I would like to have a relationship with you. I love what Tim Keller says about this. He says, Jesus' teaching consistently attracted the irreligious while offending the Bible-believing religious people of his day. He left the place of comfort. He went out to connect with people. One of the early church fathers said this, when Jesus then is with the multitudes, he is not in his house, for the multitudes are outside of the house. And it is an act which springs from his love of men to leave the house and go away to those who are not able to come to him. Here's my point. The words of Jesus, give me a drink. Guys, a Samaritan woman was considered unclean from birth by the Jews. Like, you wouldn't even touch this one. Forget drink from her cup. But this is who Christ is. He goes out. He connects with people. He opens up his heart and his life. Listen, if you're a follower of Jesus today, if you claim to be a Christian in this room today, I want you to consider this. Do you have the same impact on outsiders that Jesus did? Or do you just basically connect, with people who are moral and people who have it all together, conservative, buttoned down, moralistic people that have it all put together? Those are your friends. Or do you make room for the marginalized? Do you make room for the outcast? Do they have a place around your dinner table? If they don't, maybe the words you're speaking are not the words of Jesus. And I encourage you today, if you're a Christian, let's learn the words of Jesus. And let's say, Lord, I want to speak I don't want to just claim to be a Christian. I want to speak your words to the culture that I live in. In verse 10, it says, Jesus answered her, if you knew the gift of God, and who it is that is saying to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. Look at what it says in verse 13. Jesus said to her, everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks of the water that I will give him will never thirst again. The water I will give him will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life. What Jesus is saying is you don't recognize, you don't realize the person you're talking to. Woman, you don't understand that I'm the Messiah. You don't understand that I can give you living water that will transform your life. This is the meta-narrative of the Bible throughout the biblical context, over and over again. What God is speaking to people is this. He's saying, for your souls, what we do as human beings is we worship stuff. Money, sex, friends, lovers, entertainment, sports, fame, success, power. But God is saying, you need something deeper. There's a hole in your heart that only God is able to fill. Jeremiah chapter 2 and 13 says, for my people have committed two evils. They've forsaken me, the fountain of living water. So this terminology is not new to Jesus. Right in the Old Testament, God's already speaking. You've forsaken living waters. But here's what he says. You've replaced it with this. And hewed out cisterns for themselves, broken cisterns that can hold no water. He says, your wealth is a broken cistern. You think if I can just get so much money, if I can put it in to this cistern, it's going to hold. I'll be happy. I'll be satisfied. But there's a hole, and it's never enough. If I can marry this person, the person of my dreams, I'll be happy for the next 50 years. I'll never think twice about the decision I made. But there's a hole in that relationship without Jesus. If it's fame, if it's power, if it's whatever it is that you build for yourself, God says, there's a hole. You'll never be satisfied. Matthew Perry, in his book, Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing, says this. I had all that the world has to offer. Julia Roberts as my girlfriend. It doesn't matter. You have to drink. I just bought my dream house. It looks across the whole city, but can't enjoy that without a drug dealer. I'm making $1 million a week. I win, right? Would you like to have a drink? Why, yes, I would. Thank you very much. I've had it all, but it was all a trick. Nothing was going to fix this. $1 million a week, but it doesn't satisfy. You still need alcohol to numb your mind. And that's why Jesus gives us the answer. Listen to the words of Jesus in John 7 and 37. On the last day of the great feast, the great day, Jesus stood up and cried out, listen, if anyone thirsts, let him come to me and drink. Whoever believes in me, as the scripture has said, out of his heart will flow rivers of living water. Jesus says, if you put your trust in me, there's going to be life-giving water. There's going to be inside you a spring of water where you don't have to look on the outside. But here's the key. You have to believe in him. You don't need to believe in a church. You don't need to believe in a way of doing Christianity. You don't need to believe in, money, giving money or doing good work. That's not it. You put your faith in Jesus. But here's the challenge. Can we put all of our chips into Jesus? Can we put everything we have into Christ? I've been following soccer. I love soccer. And recently, the best player in the world, Messi, sorry to all the Ronaldo fans here, Messi's definitely the GOAT. And so Messi moves from a club in Europe to Miami. Now, what's interesting about it is the highest paid player on the Miami team was making $4 million a year, okay? When Messi was hired, when he was brought over, they agreed to pay him $60 million a year. I know. Is that crazy? $60 million. $4 million is the highest. They're paying him. Can you imagine what the locker room was like? Can you imagine what the boys were like? Are you serious? What are you doing? You're waging everything on this one guy. But they did because he was the best. He is the best. And so here's what's happened. When before they hired him, they brought him on the team, they had, I think, 900,000 followers on Instagram. Right now, 3 months later, they have 15 million followers. Their average game, the cheapest ticket to their game, was selling for $30 a ticket. Now, it's easily $500 a ticket. In fact, for the Miami-Charlotte game, they were reselling tickets for $110,000. And if someone bought it, but they were trying. Because there was demand. That's my point. Miami hasn't lost one game since Messi's come on the team. Here's the point. It's the idea of they've put everything on this guy. They've invested everything in this one person because he's the best. Here's the thing. I'm not talking about a sports star. I'm not talking about a soccer player here. We're talking about the King of Kings. We're talking about the Lord of Lords. We're talking about the maker of the universe. We're talking about the Savior of the world. We're talking about the one who gave his life to save your life. The question is this: will you wage your life on him? Would you put everything you have in him? And he says, if you do, you will never thirst again. C.S. Lewis said this: God made us, invented us, as a man invents an engine. A car is made to run on petrol, and it would not run properly on anything else. Now, God designed the human machine to run on himself. He himself is the fuel our spirits were designed to burn, or the food our spirits were designed to feed on. There is no other. That is why it is just no good asking God to make us happy in our own way without bothering about religion. God cannot give us a happiness and peace apart from himself because it is not there. It is in him that we find hope. It is in him that we find peace. And what Jesus says to this woman is, it's a gift of God. He says, if you knew the gift of God, what is the gift of God? The gift of God is that you don't have to go to your marriage for fulfillment. You don't have to go to your children for fulfillment. I know people, they married the right person, they thought, and it's disappointed them. The relationship has disappointed them. Now they're suicidal. I literally talk to people all the time. And I'm like, why? Why would you kill it? Because they put all of it in that person. They put all of it in their children. They put all of it in that job, in that career. They put all of it in the stuff. But the gift of God, see, this is important. See, you may look, if you're not a Christian, you look at a Christian, you look at someone that goes to church, you're like, I can't be like that person. He's way too good, moral. He's a really good moral person. I can't be like him. I can't be like her. She's so disciplined. I can't be like them. They come from a wonderful family lineage of Christians. That's why they're so good. I can never match up to them. But here's what you're missing out on. It's not about trying to do it in your own strength. It's a gift. It's a gift. It's like if you work, I don't know, let's say you work at a regular job, you make $50K a year or $60K a year or whatever, and there's a guy who works next to you, Fred, Fred's a great guy, a good friend. One day, Fred comes in driving a Ferrari, okay? Fred comes in driving a Ferrari. What do you say to Fred? Huh? What do you say to Fred? Do you say, oh man, Fred, I wish I could be like you? Fred, I wish I could save like you? I wish I could, invest like you? Probably not. You know what you're going to ask Fred? Hey, buddy, did you rob a bank? Did you play the lottery? Because you naturally assume it could not have been his money. You naturally assume. You're like, I know what you make. And Fred goes like, oh man, let me tell you a story. You know that Uncle Tommy I told you about that's a millionaire? Oh yeah, Uncle Tommy just gave us a gift. And that's why I have this car. And you know what you're going to say to him? Here's what you're going to say. Bro, can you hook me up with Uncle Tommy? Huh? Next time you're partying at his place, can you get me an invite? Why? Because you naturally assume it's not his money, it's someone else's money that's a gift. And if I want to drive what he drives, here's what I need to do. I need to hook up with a person that got him hooked up to this car. If that person got it to him, then I just need to meet that person. And that's what you ought to think about when you think about what does it mean to be a Christian. Don't look at a Christian and say, I can't be like that person. Look at a Christian and say, hey, I know you. I know what your life was like. I know where you used to party. I know where you used to hang out. I know what your marriage was like. What happened to you? How did you figure it all out? Let me tell you about a man named Jesus. See, that's the thing about a gift. Sometimes we look at it, we look at people and we judge them. It's like this trip, every time I come to Vancouver, I rent a car. And, I typically just rent whatever the lowest is. I had a coupon this time and I rented a mid-size Corolla, whatever. And so I got to the counter and at the rental car company at Vancouver Airport, and of course they try to upsell you all the time, right? They look at you and they're like, oh, maybe this guy, is gonna go for it. So they try to get me onto this Tesla Y model, Tesla Y. Now, if you listen to my last sermon, I don't even know how to charge these things. So that it doesn't. So I said, I'm not paying $35 more per day for this car. I said, I'm here to preach. I'm going to, mostly spend time prepping and then preach, and that's it. So then he goes out and he's, okay, I'll get your Corolla for you. So he goes to grab the keys to the Corolla and he comes back and he says, actually, you have to wait a while for a midsize. We don't have any right now. But he's like, here's a convertible. It's on us. I said, what? Come on. So if you saw me in Surrey yesterday, driving a 450 horsepower convertible with the top down, sunglasses on, bright sunny day, hand on the wheel, rocking some great music, and you thought, woo, this guy's made it. He's renting some expensive cars. It wasn't me. I didn't pay for it. In fact, I had to read the owner's manual to figure out how to get the top down. I was like, I don't even know how to do that. I've never driven one of these things. Here's my point. You can look at somebody's life and see the transformation Jesus does and judge them for how great their life is. But what you need to know is this: it was a gift. And if God can give them the gift, God can give you the gift of eternal life. Then Jesus speaks to her condition in verse 16. Jesus said to her, go call your husband and come here. The woman answered him, I have no husband. Jesus said to her, you're right in saying I have no husband, for you have 5 husbands, and the one you now have is not your husband. What you have said is true. It's classic human behavior. Use the truth to lie, right? We do it all the time. I do it all the time. My wife, I don't know what it is with her and tracking me on my drive from work to the house. I don't know what it is. I think she has a timer. So she calls me, like, when are you leaving? I give her the time, and I tell her it's going to be about 45 minutes. It's supposed to take 25 minutes with a lot of traffic on my drive home, so it takes about 45 minutes or so. And so when I say 45 minutes, it's like she puts a timer on, okay? And what I do when I drive, I love talking to people. You guys know this. I love talking to people. So I call people on the phone just to connect and catch up and all this stuff. Sometimes I end up in a really deep conversation on a call that I start maybe, let's say, 15 minutes before I get home. So now it's like if I go to the driveway talking on my phone, I'm really in trouble. So what I do is I drive around the neighborhood. So I'm just driving and driving to get this person off the phone. So then I get home, right? And I get home and I'm like, acting like, oh, it was such a bad drive and all this stuff. And so Trisha's like, what happened? It's been an hour and 15, And I say, oh, the traffic was so bad. Now, it was true. The traffic was bad. But it wasn't the whole truth. Right? That's what we do. We try to conceal. We try to hold things away. We try to, talking about conceal. Guys, this happened to me this morning. So I was shaving and I nicked myself, okay? Hopefully none of you noticed, but I nicked myself, and I was bleeding quite a bit in the morning. So I sent a picture to Trisha, this is like 5 in the morning, and I'm like, babe, I don't know what to do. I'm going to be on stage, and it's going to look so bad. It's bleeding and all this stuff. And so she texts me back, how about getting a concealer? I said, what is that? So I Googled it for all the men in the room. I Googled it. So a concealer or color corrector is a type of cosmetic that is used to mask imperfections on the skin. These imperfections can include dark circles under the eyes, blemishes, and hyperpigmentation. I said, wow! I've never even heard of this thing.
So I couldn't get it this morning, unfortunately, but I will check it out, It's like, here's the thing. Here's what I thought about. That's what we do in our human nature. We conceal. We hide. I don't want to tell you about my 5 failed marriages. I don't want to tell you about my alcoholism. There's so many functional alcoholics in society today. They can't live without it, but they are able to somehow function with it. I can't live without those drugs. We conceal what's really going on in our heart. But the reason Jesus reveals it is because he wants to fix it. A few weeks ago, we have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, Lauren and Catherine. We had some family over for lunch, and we were cooking lunch, and it was taking a while. And so the family that came over offered to take the girls to the park. It's about a 10-minute walk from our home. So we said, sure. We went to the park, came back half an hour later, and I noticed that Catherine wasn't herself. Something was off. She was sitting in a corner by herself. Didn't make much of it, and then we, were serving lunch, and when we were serving lunch, she was using her left hand for the fork, and she always uses her right hand. She's right-handed. So I said, what happened to your hand? I went to touch her arm. She was screaming. She wouldn't let me touch it. So waited a little bit to watch and see what was going on, and eventually we realized, okay, something's really wrong. She is in a lot of pain. She won't let us come near it. So we took her to Emerge right away, waited a little bit in the waiting room, then got into the back to see the doctor. The nurse came in to do an assessment. My daughter, the 3-year-old, would not even let her come near her. She was screaming at the top of her lungs. So the nurse figured it's probably a dislocated elbow is what she said, but we had to wait for the doctor. The doctor came in, and Catherine resisted that doctor like crazy. She would not let him touch her. But he was really good as a doctor with kids and made some jokes and distracted her. And before we knew it, he got a hold of her arm and like in 5 seconds put that elbow back in place. And you know what was amazing? Right in front of us, our daughter was completely healed. Like she was completely well. Like she hadn't moved that arm for hours. Right away, she was lifting her arm, dropping her arm, playing with, holding stuff with her arm. She was smiling. The tears were gone. It was powerful. And I thought about it. I said, how often are we like my 3-year-old? I said, don't touch it. Don't touch it. I don't want you to know. I don't want you to see it. I don't want to tell you what's actually going on in my marriage, what's actually going on at work, what's actually going on in my mind, the thoughts that I'm having. I don't want to tell you. But here's what I want you to know. When you tell Jesus what's actually happening, let me read this for you. Mark 2:17, the words of Jesus. Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. I came not to call the righteous, but the sinners. Here's what Jesus is saying. I'm a physician. And my job as a physician of your soul is to heal you, is to set the bone back in place, to set your heart back in its place, to set your mind back to what it's supposed to be, to remove that addiction, to remove that pain, to deal with that trauma, to help you with the abuse of your childhood. But you have to come to me. If you come to me and you open up to me and you tell me what's going on, then I'm able to heal your life. That's the promise of Jesus. That's the promise of the gospel. One writer said it this way, fallen man is not simply an imperfect creature who needs improvement. He's a rebel who must lay down his arms. Laying down your arms, surrendering, saying you are sorry, realizing that you've been on the wrong track and getting ready to start life over again from the ground floor. That is the only way out of a hole. This process of surrender, this movement full speed astern is repentance. And so if you are saying today, Finu, I want a relationship with Jesus. I want living waters. I've been going to the well of my life over and over, the well of my marriage, the well of my addiction. Porn isn't doing it. Gambling isn't doing it. Chasing a promotion isn't doing it. I want you to know that today if you come to Jesus and say, Lord, here's my life. Here's the sickness. Here's the bone that's out of place. Here's what's going on. He is able to completely transform your life. Verse 19. The woman begins to talk about worship. And she begins to ask questions about worship. But I want to highlight a couple of verses here. In verse 23, Jesus says, but the hour is coming,
and is now here when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For the Father is seeking such people to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth. Verse 26, and Jesus said to her, I who speak am he. You know, in the original Greek, the word he isn't there. It's added. It just says I am. Ego eimi. The same words that God uses to Moses when he describes his name. When Moses says, what do I say to the people of Israel? Your name is. In the Greek translation of the Old Testament, it says ego eimi. Over and over again, Jesus says, I am. I am the one you ought to come to. In the Gospel of John, over and over he says this. Let me read a few statements that Jesus makes. These are the words of Jesus. I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger. I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness. He says, I am the door of the sheep. He says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. He says, I am the resurrection and life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. I am the true vine. And in John 14:6, as we read, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Is Jesus exclusive? Yes, he is. But he is the most exclusively inclusive person the world has ever known. Why? See, here's why he has to be exclusive. It's like, I'm in airports all the time. If I go to somebody and I say, hey, is this the gate that goes to Vancouver? The plane that goes to Vancouver, is this the gate? And if someone says to me, hold on. I do not like to discriminate against gates. I don't discriminate against gates. You should not be asking me this question. You go to whatever gate you want and you'll figure it out. I'm like, what are you talking about? I do not want to go to Calgary or Edmonton or Ottawa or Montreal. I want to go to Vancouver. What is the gate to Vancouver? See what I'm saying? It's not unloving and unkind to tell somebody, here's the gate to where you're going. Here's the destination. I remember a few months ago, I was in Toronto, standing in line to board the plane. And I talk to people all the time, right? So I met this woman standing there, total stranger. We start talking, we have a great conversation. We're laughing, joking, we're complaining. In Toronto, it's easy. You start up a conversation with a person, it's very easy. 3 topics. 1, the weather. 2, the Maple Leafs and how bad they are. 3, Air Canada. It's like, so we're talking about how bad Air Canada is, whatever, and they lost my bags and stuff and different things. And then all of a sudden, we're talking about this, and she goes, we're like 4 or 5 people from the front, and she says, wait a minute, where's this plane going? And she says, what gate is this? And she looks at her boarding pass. All this time we were chatting away. She was standing at the wrong gate. Imagine if I knew that. I didn't know that, but imagine if I knew that, and I never told her. How is that loving? Isn't that the most unloving thing to do? And so, yes, Jesus is exclusive because he says, I'm the only one that's died for your sins. No other religious philosophy has done it. My parents are from India. I understand Hinduism and Buddhism. They don't have the answers. I grew up in Bahrain, in the Middle East. I understand Islam and the 5 prayers and the way their religious system works. They don't have the answer. Literally, Islam says, you don't know for sure if you'll go to heaven. Hopefully, if you do all of this stuff and make the pilgrimage to Mecca, hopefully, it'll work out for you. New Age, universalism, none of this stuff, no other philosophy has a clear hope for eternal life except Jesus. And so, here's the question. It's not just about, is he exclusive? Yes, he is. But he's the most inclusive person who is exclusive. Yes, he is exclusive, but he is inclusive of everyone. This woman should have nothing to do with him. She's a Samaritan. She's a woman. She's an outcast in her own town, meaning the Samaritans don't like her. The Samaritans don't want anything to do with her. But Jesus says, I want to have a relationship with you. I want to give you living water. Here's what he's saying. I don't care what your background is. I don't care how you messed up. I don't care what you've done. I talk about people who've been abused or people who've gone through trauma. Listen, you may be the person that abused somebody. If you repent, Jesus can forgive you. You could have been the hitman for a mob or something, or I don't know, whatever. Think of the worst thing. He says, you too can come to me if you repent and invite me into your life. And why can he do that? Because he says to her, I'm going to deal with your thirst. And here's what he says, and I think It's powerful in verse 23. The hour is coming. Every other time in the Gospel of John, when Jesus says his hour is coming, you know what he refers to? The cross. He refers to his death on the cross. He refers to shedding his blood for the forgiveness of the sins of the world. He's referring to the time on the cross. This is fascinating imagery, guys. Listen to this. On the cross, Jesus cries out, "I thirst." Not just physical thirst, but he is literally under the wrath of God, the burning fire of God, because he has taken on the sins of the world. Hotter than 1,000,000 suns. He is parched, and there's nothing to quench the thirst, because he's taken the sins of the world. And so here's what's happening. Jesus thirsts so that he can give you living water. He allowed himself to be thirsty because he wanted to give you water. If he didn't come to her and says, "I'm thirsty," he would never have started that conversation with this woman. That's what he did for you. That's what he did for me. He took your place. On the cross, Jesus took your place. You say, "Well, hold on a minute. Do I not deserve punishment for my sin?" Of course you do. Of course I do. But the gift of God is that he took it on himself, so you don't have to take the consequence of your sin. This isn't an exclusive thing where it's trying to keep you out. We want you to come. Jesus is saying to you in his words, "Come to me. Drink of me. Experience me." Friend, what do you have to lose to say, "I just want to experience Jesus. I just want to give Jesus a chance"? Every person that I've ever led to faith in Jesus who was saying to me, "Finu, I'm not all convinced, but you know what? It's compelling. I do want to give Jesus a chance." No one's ever regretted it, because he does transform your life. One writer said it this way: "He became what we are so that he might make us what he is." You know, it ends, the text ends with, the Samaritan woman goes back to her town, and she says this, "Come and see. Come and see the man who told me everything I ever did." The thing that she was ashamed of, now she was proud to say that she is no longer that person because she met Jesus. This is what happens. He transforms your life. Like, I'm not just saying that. I'm not talking about some spiritual, word play. I'm talking about actual change. A few days ago, my grandmother, who was 94 years old, died in India. I didn't live with her for long, but when I was really sick, I lived in India for 6 months, and she took care of me. She did things for me that no other person really would do, because my skin was just a mess, pus and blood oozing out of my body constantly. I'll never forget those days, how much she loved me and how much care she showed and compassion she showed towards me in that season of my life. But I thought about it when she died, because my grandparents said they were Christians, but they were not Christians. They followed like a very nominal kind of Christianity. It wasn't Christianity because they never read the Bible, they never knew Jesus, they had no relationship. My grandfather was a drunk. He would beat up his wife, beat up his kids. They had a very, 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 very difficult life. But one day, somebody came and talked to them about Jesus. Talked to them about really knowing Jesus. And my grandfather and grandmother, it was a miracle. They gave their lives to Christ. Do you know when they did that and they got baptized, their home went from a living hell to heaven on earth. Like the environment of their home and their family changed completely. When I knew my grandfather, as I got a little older, he died many years ago, I couldn't believe that they were saying that this was the man that was a drunk, that was beating up his family, that was destroying their money. It was unbelievable. Because you see, they just took Jesus at his word. And they said, "Okay, if you say you are who you say you are, I'm going to give you a chance. I'm going to surrender my life." As that writer said, "I'm going to lay down my arms. And I'm going to say, come. If you're the way, come." You know what's amazing about Jesus? In order to help this woman, Jesus made his way to her so she could make her way to him. Jesus made his way to her so she could make her way to him. That's what he's doing right now. In every room and online, today, he's made a way to you so you can make your way to him. Will you say yes to Jesus? Yes to forgiveness. Yes to acceptance. Yes to his power to change your life. Yes to the breaking of every addiction of your life. Yes to eternal joy, peace, hope, love that is not based on external things, but that comes welling up from within you. If that's you, would you pray with me? All over this room, in rooms across this country, would you pray with me right now? If you want to give your life to Jesus, say, Lord Jesus, I put my trust in you today. I believe you're the Son of God. I believe you died on the cross. I believe you shed your blood so that you could redeem me. You could take away my sin. I believe you died and you rose from the grave. And today I choose to follow you. I choose to surrender my life to you. I repent of my sin. And I choose to say yes to following you. Come and give me living water so I would never thirst again. And fill me with your presence and with your peace. In Jesus' name. In Jesus' name, amen.